You'll have to forgive me. My voice is starting to. I said yesterday. It's like in Israel, on Shabbos I don't do anything. I'm not a rabbi. I go to Hashkama Minyan. I'm home at 8:15, 8:20, and I'm done for the day. I've been here 48 hours. This is my 11th shir since I got here. My voice has to get used to this again. Okay, so I called the shir when Yair Lapid claimed that we were on the side of the Greeks. So, for those of you who know Yair Lapid, right, he's the head of the party Yesh Atid in Israel. Sometimes he says some controversial things, shall we say. So, as I put it, number one, he went once before Hanukkah and he had a meeting at Yeshivat Petach Tikva, which doesn't exist anymore. Now it's become, the yeshiva exists. It's not in Petach Tikva anymore. It's moved to Ra'anana, to Kfar Batya. It's now called Orot Shaul, but same place. And he had a meeting with them. It was before Hanukkah, and he told the students in Petach Tikva, we celebrate Hanukkah. Whereas the Jews against the Greeks, or the Jews who are following the Torah against the Hellenizers. And he said, normally we celebrate the victory of the Jews over the Hellenizers. We are the Hellenizers. Anachnu mityavnim. Right? I'm assuming that was meant to be provocative. For people who know his family, right? His father, Tommy Lapid, was the head of Shinui, which was the explicitly anti-religious party. I assume he knew what he was saying. Now that comment led to an article, as I mentioned here in the source, from Beit Hillel. Beit Hillel is an organization in Israel. It's like a Jewish think tank, something like that, where rabbis, professors, important Jewish personalities, men and women, get together and they talk about different issues in the Jewish community, try to shed a Torah perspective on it. So after Yair Lapid made this comment, they decided to write an article. And the question that I want to deal with is the question they dealt with in that article, which is, he sort of has a point. And he sort of has a point. If you are part of a certain segment of the Jewish community, whatever you want to call it, the Haredi part of the community, where there's no attempt to integrate Western culture, even if it does seep in, right? I don't want to get into that. But at least the party line is that we follow only Torah values and the outside world is dangerous and we avoid it. So at least, educationally, it's easy to explain Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah is about us versus them. We win, they lose. The message of Hanukkah is we avoid everything from them. Right? That's the message. And therefore you can turn to Yair Lapid and say, given you are a Hellenizer, there's a reason we don't like you, and you move on. Right? You move on. And to be fair, Haredim and Yair Lapid don't get along very well. Right? No surprise. But if you're part of the community, whatever it might be, modern Orthodox, Dati Leumi, whatever it is, who don't shun outside culture, then you really got to deal with the question that Yair Lapid raises, which is, well, why is it not true? Right? Meaning, if Hanukkah is the battle between those who were Torah true and those who integrated into the Hellenistic society, so if you think there's value in Hellenistic society, so then pray tell, why is he not right? Right? And I was talking to the university students last night. This is like my favorite moment where it drives the question home. When I was in YU, so I was a philosophy major, and one of the courses I took was Survey of Ancient Greek Philosophy. Now, as it happens, I took it the fall semester, and there were two students in the class, me and one of my friends, who we very much wanted to light candles, like the minhag of the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, at sunset. So sunset was 4:25, something like that, and class started 4:30. So you couldn't make it to class on time. So we got permission to come 5-10 minutes late to class. We would run back to our dorms, light, and then come. So My friend and I, that week, we had this thing that we would literally sing, Yevanim Nikbetzu Alai, as we're walking from lighting our candles into Greek philosophy class and reading, right, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, the philosophers from the time of Hanukkah, give or take a few hundred years. Like, that moment requires a bit of analysis, right? I mean, how does one go from lighting the Hanukkah candles into Greek philosophy class and with integrity say, we were on the side of the Chashmonaim and not the Mitavnim, right? You really need to answer the question. So that's the question I want to answer, right? If we aren't rejectionists, right? If we think that you can go from lighting your Hanukkah candles into a survey of ancient Greek philosophy, so how is that the case, right? What is it? How does that work? So, for many, the key starts in a pasuk back in Breshit. Not in Parshat Breshit, in Sefer Breshit, in Parshat Noach. The pasuk takes place after the story with Ham, where he does whatever he does to his father Noach, and Noach curses his son, his grandson, Canaan, his grandson, but instead he gives a blessing, he gives a bracha to his other two sons, and he tells them, Yaft Elohim liyafet, v'yishkon ba leishem v'hi Chanan eved lamo. May God, so here the JPS translates it in large Yefet, but really it means, may He give beauty to Yefet, right? From Yafyuso shel Yefet, give the beauty to Yefet, and v'yishkon, let him, and we'll translate that in a minute because it's ambiguous who the him is there, right? In the tense of Shem, and Canaan will be an Eved, Canaan will be a slave to them. And Chazal see something very surprising in this line. And they say, what does this mean? So, the truth is, maybe before I get to Chazal, let me deal with the grammatical problem that Chazal have to grapple with. Right? How do we translate this pasuk? Because the reason it's important is because Yefet in Tanakh is the forefather of Greece. Right? And Shem, obviously, is the forefather of the Jews. So if we read this pasuk, may God grant beauty to Yefet, now v'yishkon, and he should dwell in the oil of Shem. Who's the he? So it's not clear, right? It could be God, should be, or it could be Yefet, right? It could be Yefet, right? It's not clear. And you look at 5, right? Rashi understands it. He says, v'yishkon ba'alei Shem, Yashresh Shchinato b'Yisrael. It's God. Right? It's God should grant beauty to Greece, but He will only dwell, but God Himself will only dwell in amongst the Jewish people. Right? That's how Rashi understands it. Or if you look at, but if you continue, he says, Midrash Chachamim, Af al pi sheyaft Elokim liyafet, Shabana Koresh Hayab Mipnei Yefet Bait Sheni Lo Sharta Bo Shchina Ve'echan Sharta B'Migdash Rishon Shabana Shlomo Shayab B'nei Shem. Following that same grammatical construct, another midrash says, look, there were 2 Batei Mikdash. The first one was built by Shlomo, is built by Jewish hands. The second one is commissioned by Koresh. So Rashi quotes a midrash that says, even though the second Beit HaMikdash will be beautiful, God's Shekhinah will not really be there because it's the Beit HaMikdash of Koresh, not the Beit HaMikdash of the Jews. But there is another grammatical possibility, and that is the way the Targum Jonathan, or Pseudo Jonathan, in number 6 translates it, which is, Yashper Hashem Tchumei di Yefet, right? Let Him beautify the borders, or enlarge the borders of Yefet, V'itkaron B'noi, V'yishron b'midrasha d'shem, v'chnan avid lahom. Right? But his sons, meaning Yefet's sons, shall be proselytized and live in the tents of Shem. Right? So the second possibility, this pasuk isn't saying that God is amongst Shem, but it's saying that Yefet himself, the beauty ascribed to Greece, finds its place in Shem. And as I said, this reading leads to a very surprising halacha in number 3. If you go back to 3, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Af bisforim lo etir shichtavu ela yivanit. Right? If you wanted the ultimate expression of this, Right? The Torah is the epitome of shame. Right? Our Torah. Right? The epitome of shame is Avram, and Avram's children are Bnei Israel. They get the Torah. That is our godliness. But the Gemara says there are really two languages you can write the Torah in. One is Lashon HaKodesh, as we have it. But if you want, you could write an authentic Sefer Torah in another language, but only one, and that is Yevanit, in Greek. You want to have a Sefer Torah in Greek, that's totally fine. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, my time, how can you say you could write a Sefer Torah in Greek? Right? My time of Shimon Gamliel, Amar Kra, Yaft Elohim liyafet, v'yishkon ba'alei shem. Because you can have the Torah itself in Greek. You can meld Yefet in Oalei Shem, in the deepest part of Judaism. In the Torah itself, if you want, you can find a synthesis of Yefet and Shem. You can write a Torah in Greek. Dvarav shel Yefet yishu ba'alei Shem. The words of Yefet, the voice of Yefet, the language of Yefet can find its place in the innermost sanctum of Shem. And the Rambam, right, lest you think this is only one position, the Rambam says, this is how we, halacha l'maaseh. Practically, this is the halacha. He notes that our Greek is not the Greek it's talking about, so you can't do it with our Greek. Right? This is ancient Greek. Right? This is the Greek of Aristotle, right, which I can't read. Right, I can't read modern Greek either, right? But I read it in English. I have friends who read it in the original, and I'm like, okay, look, there's a level I'll go to for philosophy. Learning Greek is not what I'm going to do. But he says in number 4, in Gotvin tefillin umizuzah b'ktav ashurit. You can only write tefillin and mezuzah in, right, ashurit, in the block letters of Hebrew. V'tiru b'sfarim l'chtov af b'yivani bilvad, and Sifrei Torah can be written in one other language, in ancient Greek. Ukvar nishka yivanim in ha'olam. Now, ancient Greek, we don't speak anymore. It's been confused. Nowadays, we only do it in Hebrew. Fine, technicality. But fundamentally, Chazal are willing to say that not only, right, they read the pasuk, not just God is in Ohel Shem, but there can be a synthesis of Yefet and Shem. So now you put these together, and now you've got to ask the question even sharper. Right? If the message of Hanukkah is rejectionist, totally rejectionist, then there's no way that the Torah itself can be written in Greek. Right? But Chazal, it's not only, right, it's ironic. It's not just Chazal are saying there's value to outside culture. They take the problematic culture of Hanukkah, the Greek culture, and they say there's something uniquely beautiful about that culture, that the Torah itself can be translated only through the lens of Hebrew or Greek. And that's it. And that forces us, again, to come back to the question and say, okay, right now I don't feel as bad. Right? I don't feel as bad that I believe that you can integrate Torah and Greek culture, because Chazal said, right, if Chazal hadn't said it, right, no one would ever be allowed to say it, right? This is one of those things, right? Like, if there wasn't a Gemara and I said, I think Greek culture is so beautiful that I'm going to write my Torah in Greek, right? I'd be stoned, right? Now, to be fair, the fact that it's a Gemara doesn't mean that someone won't get angry for saying it, right? People will deny that it ever happened, right? But it's a Gemara, right? Chazal, the same Chazal, right, who said you can't learn Chachma Yevanit, whatever Chachma Yevanit is, said, but there's something beautiful about Greek culture, about their words, their language, that the Torah can be properly conveyed only through it.
So you can't take their values, but yet some of the really can be part of it. It's two different things.
So what we need to figure out is, what does it mean? Now, it's easy to say, okay, it's only the language, but not the culture. But any student of modern philosophy knows, right? But modern philosophy will be said, well, that's nice until Wittgenstein, right? But what was Wittgenstein's interest? Right? What did he grant to philosophy? Philosophy of language, right? Wittgenstein being the father of philosophy of language. He said, it's not true. You can't tell me culture without language, right? Language expresses culture. This is like, everyone likes the example of the all the different tribes, Eskimos and Inuits, and right, they have 8 words for snow, right? Why? Because they live snow. So their very language expresses their culture. But the same thing is true of any language. I remember I have a cousin who, she's like, Anglo-Israeli, right? Her parents are Anglo. She was born like in America, made Aliyah when she was like 2, right? But basically grew up in Israel. And so she speaks a very good English, and she married an American. But she told me once that the weirdest part of being married to an American for her, right, even though she's Anglo, is that the word love doesn't mean the same thing to her that it does to him. Because in Hebrew, ahav means like and love. There is no word in Hebrew for love that's distinct from like. But in English there is. And she said, even though she speaks English, it's basically her first language, she grew up in a culture in which the word ahav has 2 valences. And her husband did not. And she can't get past that. Right? And we don't think about it, but the way we talk reflects our culture. There's something... Now, one day I have to give a shir on what that means about Hebrew, that there is no word difference between like and love. But the fact is there isn't. Right? Even chiba. Chiba, okay, it means affection, but it also can mean multiple levels. So once you realize how much language captures culture, it's hard to say that, we'll accept their language and not their culture. Right? That means that there's something about Greek culture. If each language can capture the Torah, that means that there's a fundamental similarity between the values of Torah as represented in its language in Greek. Right? That's, it's one of those things I try to grapple with. But since Wittgenstein, right, that's what philosophers talk about this a lot. But you're right. Meaning what it forces us to say, okay, we got to figure out the line. And that's what we want to try to do. So what is that line? Right? What's the problematic, right, synthesis? And what's the permitted synthesis, right? And it can't just be language, because, language really does reflect culture at some level. Right? Obviously, less than other things, right? Meaning, or maybe less and more, I don't know. Right? I don't know. But differently than other things, for sure, right? Language is unique. Okay. So let's try. Let's look at a little bit of the sources that follow here. So I gave you Rabbeinu Bachia. So he tries to understand the psukim, and he gives us a bit of a just so we have the psukim clear. Right? He notes as follows. He says, "Yaft Elokim." 7. Beirach liyefet barchavat hagvul. So God granted him that he would increase the area of the earth he would live in, his borders. Vitargum, right? The translation of Unkelis is Ki archiv arei yafteh. He'll expand. Ki od hayom bnei yefet amim rabim in mispar v'artzotam rabot rechovot. The first simple level of understanding is that God is going to expand the number of nations that come from Yefet and the land they live on. Okay, and then he says, "V'hinei shem nitbarech b'shtei brachot. Elu berkat hashrat shchina beinehem." Uberchat Torah shetinatein lahem mashalo zachta shumu malachat mishtehad. Shem got 2 unique brachot: the Shechina, the divine presence, and the Torah. Uva midrash. The midrash adds that Yaft Elokim liyefet v'yishkon ba'alei Shem. That Yefet will be, that God will be in Alei Shem. Aval pi sheyaft Elokim liyefet. Even though God grants beauty to Yefet. Shabana Koresh Shayam ibn Yefet Bait Sheni, that Koresh did build a second Beit HaMikdash. V'yishkon ba'alei Shem lo sharta shchina b'Bait Sheni el b'Bait Rishon. God's presence is only in the first temple. Shabana Shlomo Shayam ibn Shem. V'chein amru Masechet Yoma Perakama Yisliku Kulu b'Mei Ezra lo sharia shchina b'Mikdash Nemar Yaft Elokim liyefet Av al pish Yaft Elokim liyefet Ainu Parsai Da'atu Mi Yefet Eina Shchina Sharal b'Bait Shem. Right? That even if God granted them the right to build a Beit HaMikdash, it's not complete. Right? There's something still unique about Shem. And then he just explains, right? Oh, that's why I put this in, right? He just says, now why is this all relevant? He just notes, because, uminalan de parsai, right? How do we know that this discussion has anything to do with Greece? Right? How do we know Yefet is part of this discussion? Because he says, right, the Persians are also from Yefet. Tichtib b'nei Yefet, Gomer Magog, Madai Yavan, V'tuval, Meshech, V'tiras. V'tayim Yosef, Tiras, Upras. Right? So Persia is the same problem, right? I mean, Yefet is not just Greece, right? It's a more expansive culture. Okay, fine. Okay, but now what do we do? Okay, so we've established that there is a uniqueness to Yefet, Greece, Persia, something about them. They can build the Beit HaMikdash itself. Maybe Shekhinah won't be there the same way it is in Israel. They can have the Torah translated through their lens. But if that's true, again, so what is the problematic? Right? What's problematic? Why did we fight so hard in Hanukkah? Right? What were we doing? What were we doing? Right? Why don't we just tell the Greeks, look, okay, fine, here's the trade-off. Why don't we write a Torah in Greek? Is that okay with you? Right? We'll show we're part of your culture because it's totally fine, right? I mean, and then would the war have been over then? Right? What were we fighting? Okay, so I put a few different possibilities here. The first one I gave is from Rav Hirsch. Rav Hirsch is sort of one of the modern fathers of modern Orthodoxy. I mean, it's a bit of an anachronism. Fine, he's neo-Orthodoxy. He's a little bit before. Thank you. Thanks, Elaine. So he obviously tried to articulate a view, and this is what he writes. He said, that which it is said, the original in Rav Hirsch is in German, right? That's why I have no problem just putting the English, because some people put the Hebrew and then the English. I'm like, they're both translations from the German. I don't, for people who know German, so you'll read the original. Okay. I'm reading a translation. I have no way of gauging what?
Yiddish sounds a little bit.
I know they're similar. I don't know Yiddish. I don't know German. So English, Hebrew, whatever. So he said, that which is said in these verses contains perhaps the deepest and farthest reaching prophecy, which ever a human eye has been allowed to see of the future, which God has allowed to be spoken by human lips. The whole history of mankind, the beginning, the end, and the middle, lies in these 3 verses. We recognize in the names of the sons of Noah the essential nuances which characterize the nations which descend from them, according to whether spirit, sensuality, or feelings predominate in their national character. Here they stand in their double significance, as individuals and as founders of the nations of the future. The first thing he notes is that Chazal see in these psukim not a discussion of the sons of Noah, but as models for the rest of history, right, of the nations and the cultures that will emerge from them. When Noah woke up and got to know of Ham's behavior, his first thought was that the principle that showed itself here in Ham can and will never be the ruling one. Raw sensuality, which has no control over itself, which has lost all reserve and all respect for anything spiritually high, is unfit for ruling. For freedom in itself is unfruitful, it is a curse without progress or blessing, it bears its ruin in itself. He says the first thing he saw in Ham was a culture of raw, unbridled sensuality. Right? He did whatever he did, right? Whether he sodomized his father or he, right, reveled in seeing his father's nakedness, right? There's something just brute sensuality, sexuality. He said, okay, there's something wrong with this culture. Okay, right? That's Ham. In contrast to the curse of Canaan is the blessing of shame. The recognition of the God who shame teaches will gain an ever greater circle, will spread, progress, until finally it will become that principle to which all the world will subscribe. While Ham represents the most ignoble, unvarnished, audacious sensuality, Shem teaches of a God who not only served as the original force which called heaven and earth into being, but who still is mover of the heaven and earth, still rules everything, so that every fiber of our being and every impulse of our will belongs to Him. Accordingly, the very opposite of Ham. Shem and correspondingly Canaan are not looked on personally as individuals, but as the future nations descending from them. Right? Shem is godliness. The recognition that there is a God in the world, that He cares, He continues to lead the world. Yefet designates feelings being open to all external impressions and influences. Hence, naivete, one is easily talked over and easily deceived. Yefet is responsive to feelings. Right? Yefet is emotion, aesthetic, right? Culture. Right? He'll develop a bit more. So thus, we've placed before us the representatives of the 3 main tendencies which characterize people and nations. The greatest ado in the world has been made by Ham, that sensuality, worldliness, which harnesses all that belongs to spirit and mind to the chariots of fame, and only allows intellect to be used or valued as far as it serves as a means of furthering the material side of life. Nations that conquer, plunder, enjoy. Right? There's always going to be a Ham in the world, right? Power, sensuality, right? Hedonism. Nations pass across the stage who represent hardly anything but raw force, sensuality, and bestiality. But nations also appear which use their forces in the service of beauty, who characterize themselves in nurturing art, aesthetic beauty. They are conscious of some higher ideal up to which mankind is to work itself out of crudeness. Said, but there are cultures that are refined, that are beautiful, right? In the world. This tendency teaches people to cloak raw sensuality in the garb of respectability and graciousness. Through grace and beauty, they foster a taste for more spiritual activities, music, poetry, and art. All those nations who cherish that which appeals to feelings represent the Yefet character. He said Yefet it's not pure spirituality, but it's refined physicality, right? It's culture, right? Meaning, I don't know if going to an art museum is, right, a spiritual experience, but it's not quite, right? It's not. High culture has there's something elevated about it, right? It's somewhere in the middle. It captures the fineness of human emotion. It's people who, right, when you go to the Philharmonic, right, you feel that there's something, right, something, what?
You enjoy human expression.
Right, but you feel like there's something unique about it, right? It's not just human expression. There's something, right, you can't even put your finger on it, right? It's overwhelming. It's a bit transcendent, right? And I don't know who, like, if you've gone to like real like classical music, right? Like highbrow, right? Highbrow. But I've gone to the New York Philharmonic, right? There's something, Beethoven's Fifth at the New York Philharmonic is an experience, right? They once had this when I was in YU. They had like a special Friday morning performance. We scalped. A friend of mine and I, we scalped tickets for like $10, and I got like 8th row orchestra. It was fun. Whatever, the things you can do when you're in New York. So he says, when we look to historical facts, we can say the stem of Yefet reached its fullest blossoming in the Greeks, that of Shem in the Hebrews, who bore the name of God as their God through the world of nations. Right to this present day, it is only these two races, the descendants of Yefet and Shem, who have become the real educators and teachers of humanity. For all the spiritual treasures which the world has acquired, these two have to be thanked, and everything which even today works at the culture and education of mankind connects up with that which Yefet and Shem brought to the world. The spiritual gifts of the Romans were only a gift of the Hellenes. Yefet has ennobled the world aesthetically. Shem has enlightened it spiritually and morally. Hellenism and Judaism have become the great active forces in the educational work on mankind, and the rest of the world has been merely passive material in which they have worked. Right? And then he takes it to his day, and he says, think about it. The culture that we live in, the Judeo-Christian world, is really, like Christianity is itself, right, came from the Judaic world. It's Judaism plus Greece. That's what it is, right? And to this day, the great sources of Western culture are the Bible, right, and Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, right? To this day, right, the art and philosophy and the mathematics, for that matter, of the Greek world, right, and the ethical teachings of the Bible, right? That is it. And he says, right, how can you deny that it's not just, the Sefer Torah, right? If you look at the history of the world, right, the great cultures of the world are a synthesis of Shem and Yefet, of Greece and, right, of Greece, or Athens and Jerusalem, as philosophers will put it. With an ode to philosophy like that, right, an ode to philosophy like that, so then, right, the Hamek Davar does this as well, right? The Netziv sees that the Jews were created. I'll skip it, but he says that the ultimate goal of the Torah is that Yefet's life will come into Shem, right? That Shem was brought into the world to, right, add to other cultures, right? Meaning it's that melding which is the ultimate goal. The Shem influencing the Yefet, right? That Judeo-Christian, so to speak, culture. And he quotes this from the Gemara in number 10, where the Gemara says that ultimately, at the end of days, all the nations are going to come to God and say everything we did in this world was for the Jews, for Torah, and God says, you're lying, you did it for yourself. But as many of the commentaries say, God doesn't say you're wrong. He doesn't say that what you did wasn't for the Jews. He just said that's not why you did it. And they say, at some level, that is the truth. That when the nations come and say everything we did, all the culture we built was for the Jews, they may not have meant that. But at the ultimate level, that is the point. Right? That these two cultures should meld. Right? That Shem should influence Yefet and create a culture which incorporates the beauty of Yefet with the morality and the godliness of shame. But now, in the 5 minutes we have left, we have to say, okay, now we've seen that the Torah can be written in Greek. We've seen that Rav Hirsch and the Netziv say that the world is and will continue to be in its highest form the integration of these two cultures. So then what were we fighting? Right? I mean, right, it only makes the question worse. Then what were we fighting? So here let's put several possibilities on the table. Okay? One is that what the Sfat Emet says. The Sfat Emet suggests, yeah, you're right, integration is great. But what's critical in integration always is to remember what's Ikar, what's Tafel. What's the main part and what's ancillary. If you mix those up, right, you're in trouble. Right? The ideal, and I said last night to some of the university students, I said, when I was teaching Daniel in Or Chaim last year to a group of guys, when I was doing Perek Hey, I was doing the feast of Belshazzar, so I showed them Rembrandt's painting, right? The feast of Belshazzar, that's what it's called, right? I said, at that moment, was I in the world of Yefet or was the world of shame? The answer is, I was learning Daniel, but I gave them, right, Yafyuso Shel Yefet, and I said to them, I was like, please, from now on, never forget who Rembrandt is, right? I want you not just to know Daniel, I want you to know who Rembrandt is, right? There, the Ikar was shame. And I was using Yefet to show them, right, how beauty, how art can capture the, right, morality, the theology of shame. But in the Greeks, right, in the time of Hanukkah, they didn't want integration. They put a pesel, they put an idol, B'kodesh HaKadashim. When you flip the values, right, and you say, right, it's not integration we want. We want that culture overpowers morality, right? That art becomes a value in and of itself, and it doesn't point to something larger. So that you have to fight, right? It's specifically because we recognize the potential value that it's so dangerous when the Ikar and the Tafel are mixed up. I like quoting from Heschel. Heschel points out that one of the most fundamental, he's not the only one, but he writes it quite articulately, one of the most fundamental religious emotions that we need is wonder. Right? I think I've mentioned this before, is wonder. He says, why? Because sometimes we have a hard time tapping into the notion of divinity. Right? Because thinking about God, we can't put words to it. Right? God is beyond us. When do we feel comfortable talking about God? When we feel wonder. Because wonder is the emotion we feel when we know we're experiencing something, but we know we can't put words to it. Right? It's that wow moment. Right? You look at the Grand Canyon and you just say, wow. And you say, there's something here I can't articulate. And Heschel says, at that moment, if you channel it, right, you can channel it towards God. Right? Maravu Masecha Hashem. How great is what you've created. Why does wonder point us towards God? Because if we capture wonder, we remind ourselves that there are things in life that undeniably exist that are beyond articulation, that are beyond human comprehension. So, and we can do the same thing with art and music, right? You can listen to a music and be lost, right? There's something transcendent about music and art. If you capture that experience, it can point you towards the divine. But if instead you say, no, my goal in life is to seek transcendence only in music and art, right? I don't use it to point to that which is beyond this world, to a divinity. You don't use it to point yourself towards morality and theology. Then it's a wasted experience. So the Sfat Emet said that was the challenge. Right? It was Ikar and Tafel. Right? It wasn't that we didn't recognize value in the Hellenistic culture. We did. But they wanted to make that the end rather than a means. Other models. I gave you at 14, and you go online, you find Shiurim, you'll find all of these. Right? Some people say, you know what the difference is? It's not just Ikar and Tafel. I'll finish one minute, so don't worry. Are the values of shame under attack? Right? In Hanukkah, right, if you're under attack, what do? Right? You've got to close up. Right? If you're not under attack, you can say there's value in the other culture. But if you're being fought, they're trying to kill your culture, so then you got to say, now's not the time to be expansive. Right? Hanukkah, we had to reject Greek culture because they wanted to kill us. They wanted to kill our culture. Others say the difference is, where do you start? Right? It's not just Yikar Tafel, it's do you have a grounding in shame. If you view the world through the lens of shame, then you can interpret Yefet as an expression of divinity, of godliness. If you start with shame, you start with Yefet rather, you start with beauty, you start with philosophy, but you're not viewing it through the lens of Torah, right? Then again, you're never going to get there. It may also depend on your intent. Why are you engaging, right? You can turn philosophy, you can turn music and art into cham. You can turn it into raw sensuality, right? There are people who are gluttons for brute sexuality, but there are people who also, right, they'll spend their entire life going to art museums and movies and theaters, right? And that's their whole life. That's all they care about, right? It can become your whole life. It can become your expression of enjoyment, right? In the end of the day, if you spend your whole time on high culture, how different is that from spending it on low culture? Right? If you are looking at high culture to refine yourself, so then it's meaningful. Right? But what's common to all of these is that the key is to recognize, yes, there's beauty out there. Yes, there's value out there. Yes, our experience as children of shame is incomplete if we don't integrate Yefet into it. But it needs to be v'yishkon ba'alei shame. It needs to be that we understand that it's a means, that we understand that it's part of the picture, but it can't dominate, it can't overpower, it can't come to replace God. But if we recognize that, we recognize that the wonder we have when we see art, music, the insight into the human character we can get from philosophy and literature can be a vehicle towards expressing the beauty of the world, the godliness of the world. So then, Yaft Elohim liyefet v'yishkon ba'alei shem. Then we'll reach, as the verse says, the integration. That is the ultimate goal. And Hanukkah, therefore, is not our battle against outside culture. It's our battle against replacing the Torah with what's outside. But the proper response to Hellenizers is not rejection. The proper response is integration with perspective. And that's really the goal of Hanukkah, to get to the point of Yaftalim liyefet v'yishkon ba'alei shem. So Hanukkah